How are you feeling? You got John Riggs here, checking out some great Nintendo games at some drastically different price points. We're looking at shooters today in this NES video. So we're looking at games like shmups, like space shooters. You might fly a plane, you might fly a UFO, you might fly something weird coming up later in the video, one of the later games. If you're not familiar with it, it'll blow your mind. It's pretty insane. The price is even more insane. The idea is just to show that there's a lot of different Nintendo games at different prices, and just because they spin more, just because they're more expensive, it doesn't always necessarily mean that they're better. Although there are some great games on this list. I do love me some shooters. And if you love Nintendo games, you'll love the homebrews I make. I also have my signed 1-up cards. I'm happy to send those your way. I also make custom air fresheners just for fun. You can support the channel by checking out my link in the description below. Thank you much. Let's start this list with a game I see at conventions sometimes for $1, and that's Captain Skyhawk. There's nothing wrong with Captain Skyhawk. Believe it or not, it says Milton Bradley on the logo, but it's made by Rare. Yeah, the guys who brought you games like GoldenEye, the guys who got you games like Battletoads, got you Captain Skyhawk, and at $1, it's a deal. Now, it is made in abundance. There's a ton of these floating around, so that's why you see it for between like $1, $5, somewhere in there. But I've seen it as low as $1 at conventions, just because they had so many of them. They just got to get rid of them, and that's a deal for you. Now, I think the graphic on this game is too big. The graphic on this game, like your ship, is almost too big. So sometimes, like as you're flying along, you don't see the enemy or the bullet until it's too late. There is altitude, so you can like kind of go up and down over the hills of these things too. Reminds me a little bit like Zaxxon from back in the day. That you can like, choose your altitude, pitch. What's the word I'm thinking of? I don't know. Captain Skyhawk for $1. It's not bad. How about Tiger Heli for $5? Now, Tiger Heli in the arcade, I loved. Tiger Heli on the NES, I liked. It's okay. It's a shooter, but you with the helicopter overhead, and I think it's just because it feels like it's missing something. And I don't know if it's like the graphics are what they were for the time. The animation, I wish it would scroll a little bit more smoothly. But if you can get past all that, it's still a pretty decent game. I mean, the arcade game's great, and the NES version is the best port they could do, I'm sure. However, for $5, it's not bad. Tiger Heli, I mean, may as well, right? We had Gyrus, and Gyrus was another game for about $10 or so. I usually see this go for. Gyrus is another game that came from the arcades earlier. It's from Konami, and the gimmick behind this one is instead of like flying upward or instead of like being a horizontal or vertical shooter, it is looking down the barrel of the scope here. The enemies fly towards you, but you're shooting below, and you gyrate. I don't know if that's where Gyrus came from. It makes sense to me. But your controller, your joystick in the arcade was the 720 controller. It didn't go straight. It was like to the side. You had to like rotate it around so your ship would actually fly around to avoid the enemies as you're shooting more towards the center. And Gyrus is a pretty decent game. Cool to see the arcade game from '83 then come out for the NES, whenever the NES release date was, 88, 89, somewhere in there. It was cool to see. And then we go on to Life Force. Now, Life Force by Konami, I did know of Gradius, and Gradius was okay. And I never had a chance to play Gradius 2 until way later in life. But to me, when I played Life Force, I was like, oh, this is it. This is the one. Life Force, it was the game for me, for sure. Life Force is so fantastic. Well, just like Gradius, you play as the ship, but you get to choose your upgrades. And I loved that about this game, because sometimes when you play a game like a 1942, 1943, when you get your upgrade, that's your upgrade. It's whatever they give you. But this one, you get to hold on to them. And then there's the risk versus reward, where the more items you collect, you can choose a better power-up. Maybe you want to save missiles, or maybe you want to save them all up for the force field to protect you from enemy shots and stuff like that. I loved that about this game. And Life Force was cool, because Life Force was like kind of like bio, like grossness sometimes. You know what I mean? Because it's like you're in someone's body or something. Ugh. Life Force is a personal favorite of mine. I do love me some Life Force. And for $15, it's great. Boy, Silver Surfer. Now it goes for about $25 or so, 20, $25, somewhere in there. I don't think I've ever beaten one level in Silver Surfer. Now the cool thing about Silver Surfer, not just the soundtrack, Tim Fallon, always, but you get to choose which level you want to go to. Don't matter, you ain't gonna last long. Now there are some people who I'm sure go out of their way to actually challenge themselves to play this game. And again, the game wouldn't be that hard, but your character is so big, so your hitbox is insane. If you were like half that size, I think it'd be a decent game. I should work on that. Could I hack that game and remove the hit detection? I wonder if I can do it. I'm not gonna worry about that. Anyway, Silver Surfer gets a bad rep for being a hard game. And it's hard because your character sprite is way too big, but it is still playable. I've seen people do it, but man alive. And that's a lot of money. I mean, I know it's $20, $25 is what it is, but you'd figure that something like that would actually, you'd want to enjoy your video game experience. Like, why are you making yourself stressed out over a video game? It doesn't make any sense to me. Go on to Terra Crest for $40. Now, Terra Crest, another great game from the arcade. I never saw it in the arcade. I only knew the NES version. But I like this game. I thought it was a lot of fun that you had the vertical shooting part of it, and then your upgrades are like in a little base next to like a box or something like that. So you hit the button so you know what you're gonna get, you grab it, and then from there, you can choose to either have it like all contained within your ship to shoot your things, or you can kind of spread out and branch them out to have them like, work almost independently as you're shooting away from you to give you a more wide shot, or, like super focused so you can like really take down some of the bigger items and bigger bosses and everything too. Terra Crest is a fun one and it's definitely worth checking out. And for $40, that's when it starts getting a little bit like, oh, that's getting up there a little bit for a Nintendo game, but that one may just be worth it. And then we have Scoon, this underwater submarine. It was a game I remember seeing in the early Nintendo stuffs, like when you got Nintendo Power, then there's like the Nintendo Encyclopedia or whatever. I remember seeing Scoon in there and I never saw it. None of my friends had it. None of my rental stores had it. I was like, man, that game came out so early that it skipped the boat on everything. Like it came out before video game rentals were a thing. And I literally never saw it until like later in life when I started collecting games again. It features topless mermaid on the title screen, 1 pixel, that's all you get. Good luck with that. And the game is interesting. You play as an underwater submarine, as opposed to an over-the-water submarine. You play as a submarine. The underwater, I think, is implied by the word sub and marine, because you're under. Never mind. So, thank you, medication. You have to like blow up the stuff, and then I love it when you blow up the thing, and then like the swimmers all come out all at once, and you have to like collect them along the way. It is an early Nintendo game, but there's still a lot of charm to this game. And I could see some competitions happening with a game like Scoon. I think it's pretty cool. Gunak, $300. My goodness, Gunak for $300. But have you played it? Boy, it's good. Gunak, I mean, a lot of people say that Rekka, which is a Famicom game, might be the best shooter for the Nintendo systems, if you include Famicom. I might have an argument for Gunak, just because it's so good. I mean, it is up there. I mean, they're both great. Don't get me wrong, they're both great. But for me, like the TurboGrafx 16 was like the shooter system. I loved the TurboGrafx 16, and Gunak was a TurboGrafx 16 quality shooter on the NES. It's so good. It's so fantastic. Just how it looks and how it feels, and it's insane. And $300 is pretty insane too, but yeah, here we are. What are you gonna do? Oh, I know what you can do. There's a lot of other ways to play these games. You don't just have to have the cartridge, I'm telling you. But even more than Gunak, even more than $300, we have a shooter at $450, and I'm adding this to the list. Zombie Nation. You don't play as a ship, you play as a giant zombie head. Funny. Yeah, you play as this giant zombie head flying around, shooting buildings, people are falling out and everything like that. I bought my copy of Zombie Nation at the electronics boutique at the South Center Mall in Tukwila, Washington, probably 2001, when Sopper, etc., and EB Games and all them, when they were all liquidating their stock. And I forgot how much I bought it for. It was something like $8 or $9, of course, at the time, because they were liquidating the stock. There was prices on games, but it's like, who cares? Get rid of it. I'm glad I did back then versus trying to buy it now. But it's a fun one. Anything weird like that. And I love me the obscure. I love me the weird. And this one, boy, it's both. And it has a little bit of horror element because it's called Zombie Nation. And the box art's kind of funny too. It's worth checking out just for the box art. So what about you? Which one would be worth the price point of the game? For me, it's all about Life Force. $15 for Life Force. You might even be able to find it for $10. If you're at a convention, you see Life Force, you can probably even talk them down to $10. To me, it's the best shooter on the NES. That's my personal opinion, but I'm sure you have yours, and I'd love to hear yours in the comments. I usually don't need to tell you that. You will tell me yours in the comments because you always do, and I appreciate you for it. I've done other videos like this for the NES, looking at just like, here's the genre, and let's look at the cheap games, let's look at the expensive games, and find the one that's probably best worth it. And so far, usually, the cheaper games are the ones that are winning.